Thank you for listening to the rough draft of this chapter in company of the Crescent Blades. Consider donating directly to the author through cashapp at $EliasLeast. Leave a comment on what you think about the story so far, and continue your support by sharing your thoughts and the video. Chapter 15. Echoes of the Crescent Blades. The morning light began as the group embarked on their journey, filled with a rejuvenated sense of hope and faith. The air was invigoratingly crisp, and the white, brilliant rays of the single dwarf star filtered through the dense canopy above, creating dappled patterns on the verdant forest floor below. A chorus of birdsong greeted them as they ventured deeper into the ancient woodland, each member of the group feeling their spirits buoyed by the serenity of their surroundings. As they traversed the winding forest paths, the group chatted light-heartedly, exchanging tales of their past exploits and joking about the seemingly absurd situations they often found themselves in. Their laughter rang out through the trees, accompanied by the steady rhythm of their horses' hooves on the soft, mossy ground. There was a noticeable awkwardness between Lillian and Eldrick, but no one brought it to voice. This idyllic scene was abruptly shattered as they rounded a bend in the path, and were confronted with a sight that would haunt their dreams for years to come. The once tranquil forest seemed to have transformed into a nightmarish hellscape, the very air around them thick with the relentless buzzing of countless flies. The ground, once a vibrant carpet of emerald moss, was now stained a sickly crimson, littered with the gruesome remains of hundreds of forest goblins. Their once formidable bodies now lay lifeless, twisted into grotesque shapes that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned warriors among the group. The air, once so fresh and invigorating, now felt heavy and suffocating, the stench of death and decay so overwhelming that it seemed to cling to the very fibers of their beings. Each member of the group fought to maintain their composure as they surveyed the gruesome scene before them. Forest goblins, though repulsive in life, had never been known to emit such a nauseating stench. The putrid odor assaulted their senses, making it difficult to breathe and causing their stomachs to roil in revulsion. One of the brothers spoke up in an attempt to lighten the heavy atmosphere as Gavric said, "You know, I've always heard that goblins were good at sneaking around and causing trouble, but I never knew they had such a talent for playing dead." Despite the grim circumstances, a few weak chuckles echoed throughout the group. Eamon smiled at the gesture more than at the joke and replied, "Oh, come on, really? That's the best you can do in a situation like this." Gavric shrugged. "Hey, I'm just trying to lighten the mood a bit. It's better than focusing on this, well, you know." The group exchanged weary smiles, appreciating the brief moment of levity amidst the horror that surrounded them. Their faces pale and their hearts heavy, the group steeled themselves and pressed onward, determined to uncover the truth behind the massacre that lay before them. The further they ventured into the forest, the more they felt the weight of the tragedy that had befallen the goblin horde, the eerie silence that had settled over the once vibrant woodland, a chilling reminder of the cruelty that lurked within the shadows. The forest goblins, although lacking considerable strength individually, posed a formidable threat when amassed in vast numbers. Their astonishing rate of reproduction mirrored their uncanny rat-like appearance, making them a persistent and dangerous enemy. Confronting a few dozen of these creatures would prove challenging even for the most highly trained and battle-hardened warriors. The mere thought of facing a horde of these repulsive beings was enough to send shivers down the spines of the bravest souls. As the group surveyed the aftermath of the slaughter that sprawled before them, they couldn't help but realize the staggering magnitude of the goblin horde they had unwittingly encountered. It became abundantly clear that the outcome of this battle could not have been achieved through conventional human methods. The scene was both grotesque and awe-inspiring, leaving the group to ponder what kind of extraordinary power could have vanquished such an enormous swarm of goblins. Amidst the chaos, a sense of morbid curiosity took hold, leading to hushed whispers and wild theories about the mysterious force responsible for the carnage. The air was thick with a sense of unease, and the group couldn't shake the feeling that this gruesome sight was merely the beginning of a larger, more harrowing adventure that would test their courage, their wit, and perhaps even their sense of humor. Eldrick spoke up as they viewed the gruesome scene from the center of the wide clearing. "Let us pray to Lord Cyrus that whatever did this has moved along to haunt a different part of these woods." Service replied to Eldrick's call for prayer to their newly agreed-upon deity. "I would reconsider that prayer, High Priest. This is the work of Lord Cyrus himself." He pointed to the head of the nearest corpse. The group found themselves simultaneously awestruck and horrified by the staggering efficiency of the massacre that unfolded before their eyes. Each had contemplated that it seemed impossible for any mere mortal to have achieved such a staggering feat of destruction. As they carefully examined the battlefield, they saw the peculiar manner in which each goblin had met its end. Every creature displayed a small, yet identical puncture wound at the very center of their forehead, as if executed with surgical precision. It was as if the goblins had voluntarily remained stationary, permitting their assailant to eliminate them methodically, one by one. Unease permeated the group as they exchanged puzzled glances, attempting to decipher the perplexing scene before them. The puncture wound perfectly matched the shape that Cyrus's infamous Crescent Blades would make on such a target as a goblin skull. As the group stood amidst the carnage, their imaginations painted a vivid, fantastical picture of the events that had transpired. In their mind's eye, they saw an army of 300 goblins emerging from the shadows of the forest, their beady eyes fixed upon a commanding figure clad in black, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to glow with an otherworldly power. In awe of this imposing presence, the goblins dropped to their knees, recognizing the godlike prowess of this enigmatic figure. They offered themselves willingly as sacrifices to his greatness, eager to contribute their souls to the creation of a glorious afterlife that Lord Cyrus would bestow upon his most loyal followers. In this wild imagining, the goblins' final moments were not filled with terror, but with a sense of reverence and purpose. As they knelt before the mighty figure of Lord Cyrus, their souls soared towards the heavens like a swarm of fireflies, leaving behind their lifeless bodies as testimony to the divine power they had witnessed. The group couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and unease as they envisioned this surreal scene. The idea that Lord Cyrus had orchestrated such a spectacle, blending elements of tragedy and triumph, was as disconcerting as it was mesmerizing. The wind picked up, pulling them out of their thoughts. The foul stench that filled the area was so repulsive and overpowering that even a slight whiff of it was enough to make their stomachs churn. Amid the putrid air, Clang, unable to endure the nauseating smell any longer, succumbed to sickness. His retching set off a chain reaction, and within moments, the entire group found themselves gripped by an unrelenting wave of nausea. Incredibly, Lillian seemed to be the only member of the group unaffected by the stench. Her laughter echoed through the air as she rode courageously across the grim landscape, seemingly impervious to the grisly horrors that lay before her. With each laugh, she appeared to revel in the danger and chaos surrounding them, unwavering and resolute in the face of even the most terrifying and macabre scenes. The entire group gazed at her in bewilderment, their eyes transfixed on her dark silhouette that seemed to absorb the light from its surroundings, creating a stark contrast against the pure white stallion she rode. The young woman appeared as though she had stepped out of the pages of a long-forgotten myth, a merciless harbinger of doom who had come to claim the souls of those whose existence was a bane to the world. As she laughed again at the grisly scene unfolding around her, the wind danced through her straight auburn hair, and the white light of the sun seemed to cast her in a haunting glow. Her eyes sparkled with a fierce intensity that belied her youthful appearance, a chilling testament to the depths of her madness. In that moment, each member of the group could not help but shudder. This 16-year-old girl with her sinister allure and disarming presence was utterly and irrevocably insane. And yet, there was a certain allure to her unhinged disposition, an intoxicating blend of courage, recklessness and humor that seemed to defy the horrors that surrounded them all. Lillian urged her horse forward with a sudden burst of determination, and the resulting commotion seemed to invigorate the other animals in the caravan. As if sensing the urgency, they accelerated the wagon's pace, and the group swiftly found themselves free from the suffocating odor and dense woodland. Emerging from the forest, they came to an abrupt halt as an expansive mountain vista unfolded before them, its rugged beauty stretching as far as the eye could see. Scattered along the trail were a few humble shacks, which might have piqued their curiosity under different circumstances. However, the group's attention was diverted from the breathtaking landscape and the modest dwellings by the presence of 6 men who stared at them with a mixture of shock and apprehension. Their eyes widened in terror as they took in the sight of the 6 travelers, clad in black and emanating an aura of dread. With a primal instinct to flee, the men turned on their heels and bolted down the trail, their screams of fear echoing throughout the valley. Clang says, "What in the 9 hells was that about?" As the group exchanged puzzled glances, they tried to decipher the cause behind the men's sudden and frantic departure. The pieces soon fell into place as they deduced that they had unwittingly stumbled upon a notorious bandit hideout, and their unanticipated arrival had been interpreted as a menacing threat. With the knowledge that their destination, a hidden cave nestled midway up the mountainside, was drawing closer, they decided it was time to secure their wagons and horses and carefully plan their next move. A spirited debate ensued among the group members as they hashed out various strategies for approaching the cave. Cyrus and Clang, itching for a challenge, advocated for a full frontal assault, intending to battle their way through any opposition. In contrast, Lillian proposed a more cunning approach, suggesting they lie in wait until darkness fell and catch the bandits off guard as they slept. After all, she reasoned, the weapons and armor the group possessed would give them a considerable advantage over the bandits. However, it was Eldrick who stepped forward with an alternative plan that blended diplomacy with a subtle show of force. He recommended offering the bandits a portion of their precious gemstones in return for their allegiance, while simultaneously making it abundantly clear that they were more than prepared to engage in combat if necessary. In doing so, they could potentially convert these outlaws into valuable allies in their grand quest for Lord Cyrus. The group deliberated over each proposal, carefully weighing the risks and benefits associated with every strategy. Ultimately, they agreed to give Eldrick's diplomatic approach a shot, hoping that the prospect of gemstones would prove sufficiently enticing to the bandits and pave the way for a peaceful resolution. Traversing the precarious pathway that snaked its way up the mountain slope, the group found themselves confronted once again by the bandits they had hoped to negotiate with. Over a dozen men with bows drawn and arrows notched stood behind a small barricade. As tension hung in the air, each member of the group instinctively gripped their weapons, poised for combat should the need arise. Eldrick, however, maintained a composed demeanor as he stepped forward to open a dialogue with their newfound adversaries. To the group's surprise, the bandits presented a wholly unexpected response. Far from the ruthless and belligerent cutthroats they had anticipated, these men professed a desire for tranquility. "Please, we want no trouble," one of the bandits pleaded, his voice trembling. "Just leave us be and let us live in peace." The unexpected turn of events left the group exchanging baffled glances, trying to make sense of the seemingly incongruous behavior from these notorious outlaws, especially considering they were in the heart of their own secluded hideaway. As the group processed this bewildering revelation, they couldn't help but question the authenticity of the bandits' peaceful intentions. "Can you believe this?" Clang whispered to Cyrus, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Are they really asking for peace?" Cyrus shook his head, equally perplexed. "I don't know. It could be a trick." In the midst of their contemplation, an undercurrent of wit and humor began to emerge as they entertained the idea of bandits who had perhaps grown weary of their lawless ways, or simply sought an early retirement from their life of crime. "Maybe they're just tired of stealing and fighting," Lillian suggested with a smirk. "Or perhaps they've decided to take up gardening instead." The group couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of the notion, as the tension in the air gradually lightened. As the tension between the group and the bandits persisted, Service was suddenly struck with an idea to test out a hunch. Swiftly he sprang into action, dashing forward and charging towards more than a dozen men who were still behind the makeshift barricade along the pathway. His booming war cry reverberated through the air, catching his comrades off guard as they watched the spectacle unfold with a mixture of bewilderment and concern. However, it was the reaction of the men behind the small wall that truly stunned them all. Rather than retaliating or bracing themselves for the impending attack, the bandits let out terrified screams before fleeing helter-skelter in every direction. The bizarre scene unfolded like a comical farce, leaving the group utterly dumbfounded. Service, hardly able to contain his laughter, turned to his companions, his face split by a grin as wide as a chasm. He shrugged with an exaggerated motion, his entire upper body rippling with the effort, conveying a silent message that was universally understood. He had absolutely no idea what was going on, but he couldn't help but find the situation amusing. The group couldn't help but join in the laughter, the tension that had previously gripped them dissolving into a wave of chuckles and guffaws. The peculiar escapade had injected a dose of levity into the otherwise serious situation, and for a brief moment they reveled in the absurdity of it all, appreciating the unexpected twist of humor amid their dangerous quest. Once Service stopped laughing, he looked at his companions that he was genuinely starting to like. If this is truly what it is going to be like in the service of Lord Cyrus, consider me all in. The company of the Crescent Blades, with a sense of curiosity and determination, persisted in their journey along the winding path for a couple more hours. The dense foliage on either side of the trail seemed to hold its breath as they ventured deeper into the mountain's embrace. They encountered no more people along the way, but they did discover 2 more makeshift barricades, evidence of previous guard posts that had long since been abandoned. As they continued to ascend, the adventurers exchanged light-hearted banter and shared in the occasional burst of laughter, all the while remaining ever vigilant of their surroundings. The playful and witty exchanges served to ease the tension that had been mounting since their odd encounter with the bandits below. Gradually, the path began to widen, and the oppressive mountain foliage gave way to a more open landscape. The group found themselves in awe as they stepped into a hidden gem of a small town, tucked away behind a massive formation of rock. It was nestled within a naturally formed flat section on the side of the mountain, as if the earth itself had cradled this secret refuge in its stony palm. The town seemed to have sprung up from the very heart of the mountain, its buildings constructed of stone and wood, blending seamlessly into the rugged terrain. As the followers of Lord Cyrus took in the sight before them, they couldn't help but marvel at the town's expansive view of the surrounding lands and the eerie silence that made each footfall echo across the rocks. The company of the Crescent Blades, intrigued by the hush of the hidden town, cautiously ventured down its wide main street. This thoroughfare was lined with sturdy wooden buildings, each one showcasing a blend of architectural creativity and practicality, reflecting the industrious nature of the townsfolk. These structures, which once housed a medley of businesses, from bustling market stalls to lively taverns, now seemingly abandoned. Most of the buildings in the town boasted at least 2 stories, with some reaching as high as 3 or even 4. It was evident that the architects and builders had chosen to build vertically, maximizing the limited space available in this mountainous enclave. This decision lent the town a unique aesthetic, with the multi-storied structures creating an intriguing layered skyline that piqued the group's curiosity and inspired a sense of unease. Eamon, his senses heightened by the eerie atmosphere of the deserted town, suddenly noticed something amiss. With a subtle wave of his hand, he motioned for the others to take heed of the countless eyes that watched them from the concealed recesses of windows above, and the shadowy rooftops that loomed over them. The company of the Crescent Blades halted in their tracks, an uneasy tension gripping the air as the truth of their situation dawned on them. It became apparent that they had unwittingly stumbled into the heart of a meticulously designed kill zone. From the vantage points above, Hundreds of archers could easily unleash a deadly hail of arrows upon any unwary intruders who were foolish enough to choose this particular route of assault. The realization of their perilous predicament sent a collective shiver down their spines, and they instinctively drew closer together, seeking strength in unity. As the group cautiously scanned their surroundings, their eyes darted from one shadowy window to the next, trying to discern any sign of movement or hostile intent. Their hearts pounded in their chests, the adrenaline coursing through their veins as they braced themselves for the potential onslaught. From the building directly ahead of them emerged a solitary figure, his arms raised high in the air, the unmistakable gesture of an unarmed truce. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man, not quite as massive as Clang, but certainly larger than most. As he approached the group, his eyes remained lowered, carefully avoiding direct contact with any of them. With a voice that quivered with apprehension, he uttered two simple yet unexpected words. "We surrender." Overcome by emotion, the man dropped to his knees. Eldrick, sensing the gravity of the situation, stepped forward and surveyed the scene, acutely aware of the multitude of cautious eyes still focused on them. "Stand, sir," he commanded gently. "Let us find a suitable place to discuss the terms of your surrender." The man, hesitantly rising to his feet, finally lifted his gaze to meet the group's. "The tavern is just over there," he gestured. "Or my office is in the building I emerged from. I am Gregory Thorne, the elected mayor of Silverstone Hollow, and we can go wherever you feel most at ease." Eldrick glanced at his companions, seeking their input. A chorus of agreement resounded, and he declared, "The tavern it is."
As the company of the Crescent Blades followed Gregory towards the tavern, they couldn't help but exchange bemused glances, wondering how this seemingly ordinary town, with its deserted streets and hidden population, had come to such a dramatic point of surrender. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of tension, anticipation, and a hint of humor at the peculiar turn of events. They knew that the upcoming negotiations would prove to be an intriguing and potentially pivotal chapter in their ever-unfolding adventure. Upon stepping into the tavern, the group had been eagerly anticipating a moment of respite, a chance to savor a refreshing drink and unwind. Instead, they were immediately met by the pungent stench of infection and the heart-wrenching moans of those teetering on the brink of death. Bewildered, they turned their gaze to Mayor Gregory, only to find his expression etched with sorrow and defeat. "We converted the tavern to a makeshift triage. It was closest to the alcohol, which helps with the pain." The dimly lit room revealed dozens of men, their faces contorted in agony as they clung to life with every ounce of strength they had left. Each man's festering wounds bore testimony to a lack of care for several days, the infection having taken a firm grip on their battered bodies. Despite the variations in the injuries, one thing was abundantly clear. They were all inflicted by the same type of sharp weapon. As the group surveyed the harrowing scene, a profound realization dawned on them. They had seen these types of wounds before, and they knew all too well who was responsible. The masterful handiwork could only belong to one entity, Cyrus. The group's hearts swelled with reverence and awe at the power and divine will of the one they considered a god. Though they didn't fully understand the purpose behind Cyrus's decision to maim these men, they trusted in his plan and vowed to honor his will. The jovial atmosphere they had hoped for was now a distant memory, replaced by a sense of duty and devotion to the enigmatic figure who seemed to shape their lives even more in his absence. Eldrick's gaze met Gregory's with a gravity that carried the weight of the situation. His voice, steady and resolute, conveyed the terms of their agreement. "We accept your full and absolute surrender. Your entire town and all its contents are now the property of the company of the Crescent Blades. If you abide by this surrender, I will save all of these men and treat your people fairly as we move towards our goals. If you do not, you and each of them will die along with everyone else in this town. Do you accept these terms?"